Hey guys, it's Buck Joffrey with Wealth Formula Podcast. Are you sitting there on the sidelines waiting to put your money to work? Well, I've got something that you probably never even heard about. How about cashing in with cash machines? You know, ATMs. Yep, you can actually make money every time someone makes a transaction by owning a machine yourself. Now, this has actually been an incredibly profitable asset class utilized by the ultra-rich for decades. And now it's available to you through my friend Dave Zook, founder of the Real Asset Investor. How does just under 25% cash-on-cash return sound to you? And what if that money was mostly tax-free because of depreciation? Sounds too good to be true, right? Well, it isn't. Dave's ATM team has a tremendous track record that has consistently outperformed even these impressive pro formas. So if you've got lazy money sitting around, check it out. Contact Dave and his team at therealassetinvestor.com. Again, that is therealassetinvestor.com, or email him at info@therealassetinvestor.com for more details. Listen, opportunities like these don't come around every day, so get in touch now and cash in with cash machines.
You are listening to the Wealth Formula Podcast with Buck Joffrey. Get ready to change your life.
Welcome, everybody. This is Buck Joffrey with the Wealth Formula Podcast. I'd like to start today by telling you all the great things on wealthformula.com that you need to go and get. The first thing is the Weekly Wealth Widget. The Weekly Wealth Widget is the name for my newsletter now, which is not quite the same as it used to be. So the Weekly Wealth Widget is now going to include everything that was on the newsletter before, but also we're going to have a weekly bite-sized educational piece that is going to slowly but surely build your financial IQ. So every week you can get, it might be some terminology, some concept, etc., that, you hear all the time when you are listening to an investor show or when you're listening to your financial planner and they don't want you to know what they're talking about, etc. So that is the Weekly Wealth Widget. Go ahead and sign up for that at wealthformula.com. Also, you can get to participate in Investor Club if you're an accredited investor. And of course, an accredited investor means you have a net worth of $1 million outside of your personal residence, or you make $200,000 per year or $300,000 if you are filing jointly. Again, lots of deal flow and education on wealthformula.com by clicking on Investor Club. Finally, Burn Zones. This is the book that every investor in real estate must read. It's about apartment investing and George Newberry's interesting recount of his life and the ups and downs and turbulence that went along with that. Highly recommended for anybody interested in real estate investing in particular. George is also the founder of our sponsor, American Home Preservation. Now, AHP for American Homeowner Preservation. It's a very cool business. Basically, what they do is they buy failing mortgages for pennies on the dollar. And instead of evicting all the tenants, they rent them back out and make a ton of money in the process. So everybody wins. The tenant gets an opportunity for a rent-to-own situation and stay in their house. The investor comes out way ahead because George pays 12% annually, paid out on a monthly basis. It's very liquid. And of course, George wins because he's running a great business, doing good and making money. So again, it's ahpfunding.com, American Home Preservation. So let's get to today's show. Now, this show is about leverage. So what is leverage anyway? The action of a lever, by definition, is to gain some kind of advantage. Now, it can be a physical advantage, like when you're using a tool, or in finance terms, as many of you know, leverage is the use of borrowed money to enhance buying capacity and hopefully in the process increase your return on investment. Now, a few shows ago, I emphasized that my belief was that the currency coveted by most people, whether they realize it or not, is time. Now, I equate wealth with time rather than dollars in the bank. Therefore, time is my currency of choice. So on this show, we often emphasize the idea of residual or recurrent cash flow via real estate or other investment vehicles as the primary means of giving you more time to do things that are important to you. However, there is another way to increase your bottom line on time, just like there is with a business where you cut expenses. That is to reduce the amount of time spent on things you'd rather not do, right? So that's another way to free up time, not just make more money, but also cut out time that is wasted or unwanted on tasks. Tim Ferris talked about this about a decade back in the 4-Hour Work Week, and that became very popular. I mean, that is a great book, by the way. If you haven't read it, it's actually really funny too. It's a little outdated now because I think a lot of the stuff he talks about, became very popular, and now it's very difficult to find the kind of services he's talking about the way he did it. But Tim writes about outsourcing just about everything using a virtual assistant that he had in India. It was a company called Brickwork, which is definitely not as good as it used to be. That's for sure, because I even tried to contact them several years ago. But I mean, this was really funny. He was outsourcing everything, even going as far as having something in there about where he had the virtual assistant talk to an angry girlfriend on his behalf. I mean, it was hilarious. But anyway, Tim Ferris made this very popular about a decade ago. And I was actually inspired by Tim's book. And I tried using virtual assistants for a while. But the hardest part for me was always dealing with companies overseas where there was a big language barrier, and often there was, substandard quality of work. So eventually I dropped the whole notion of virtual assistants in my business life altogether. And I never actually really thought about using them in my personal life. That is until recently meeting a guy by the name of Ari Meisel at a Genius Network meeting. Ari's built a company called Leverage that combines highly trained English-speaking virtual assistants combined with training on how to best automate your business and personal life. It's really a neat company. So why have Ari on Wealth Formula Podcast, right? Our investors show when we talk about cash flow, etc. Because ultimately, going back to what we said before, wealth is time, and Ari is the king of maximizing time for productivity and leisure by essentially hacking off all the unnecessary and unpleasant tasks in life. This is a service that I think that when I heard about this, I thought to myself, man, there's so many people listening to my show who are going to love the idea of this service. So anyway, that's why I have him on. And when we come back, you'll learn all about it. This really could change your life, folks. Hey, Wealth Formula Nation. You know I like making money, and I know you do too. But what if you could make money and promote clean energy at the same time? The solar energy market grew by 95% in 2016 alone, and it continues to flourish. Something to think about as an investor. Introducing Wonder Capital, the award-winning online investment platform that allows individuals to invest in solar energy projects across the U.S. Wonder's online investment platform allows you to earn up to 8.5% annually while diversifying your portfolio and helping to keep our air and water clean. Your investment in Wonder's fully managed solar investment funds goes directly to helping U.S. small and medium-sized businesses install solar panels. Best of all, Wonder Capital doesn't take any fees for investing your money. Create an account for free at wondercapital.com/wealth. That's Wonder with a U, capital.com/wealth. Welcome back to the show, everybody. Today, I have a very special guest. His name is Ari Meisel. He is the author of Art of Less Doing, More Living, Idea to Execution, and he's also the founder of a company called Leverage, which we will talk about in a few minutes. But first of all, welcome, Ari.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, Ari, tell us a little bit about your background and how you ended up getting to this company, Leverage, from where you started.
Sure. So I basically, after college, started working in development, doing construction in upstate New York. And I was living a very unhealthy lifestyle and ended up getting very sick from the lifestyle and the stress that I was under, and was diagnosed with Crohn's disease when I was 23, which seriously derailed what I was doing. It went from doing these 18-hour hard-charging days to basically having trouble getting 1 hour of work done in a given day. So in order to help manage that situation, I ended up developing a brand new system of productivity, which I called at the time Less Doing. And the idea was less doing, more living. And I wanted to help people outsource everything in their lives in order to be more effective. And I developed that into a full-on program with 9 fundamentals of how to get more done in less time. and was able to overcome my Crohn's disease through obviously a combination of that and multiple other things with nutrition and supplements and fitness. But I ended up building this company, Less Doing It, and was teaching and consulting around the world. And about 18 months ago, I was having dinner with my friend Nick Sonnenberg the day after a very large US-based virtual assistant company went out of business. We were discussing it and how we would have done it differently and decided to do our own. And about 24 hours later, we launched Leverage with free tools. We never put a penny in the company, and we were profitable and scalable from day one. And here we are 18 months later. We've grown revenue at about 20% a month every month. We've got 110 people in 16 time zones doing over 1,000 hours a week work for over 400 clients. And the value prop is that we can do anything. So it's a unique service, and we get to work on all sorts of cool stuff for all sorts of cool clients.
Yeah. And this is what I got really excited about. So, Ari, as you know, the show is actually Wealth Formula Podcast. And normally we're talking about money. And the reason we talk about investing and cash flow, and of course, you have a little bit of a real estate background too. As you know, one of the keys to cash flow investing, or one of the benefits of it, is actually creating more time for yourself, right? And so on this show, the way I always approach it is really, what are you trying to get? Your currency is not necessarily money. It's actually creating more time. So wealth equals time. So effectively, you're approaching it from a very different perspective, which is, all right, let's get rid of some of the stuff that we don't really need to do ourselves in order to create time. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. I think that people need to be focusing on what they're uniquely best at as much as possible so that everything else can be done. And to be clear, it's a very important order that I've put in place, which is to optimize, automate, outsource. A lot of times people try to outsource first, and usually that's where people have bad experiences with outsourcing. So if you're looking first, how can I optimize the actual process before I even get into outsourcing it? And even before that, we look at automation. That's where the real productivity comes from. And the thing is, especially that automation component, there's so much that we can automate now, even a month ago, a person had to do.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about sort of the idea of outsourcing, because this is going to be new to some people, because, a lot of my listeners had their faces down in the books in medicine or, engineering and so on and so forth for years and years. And they haven't really been focusing on a lot of these interesting things that have come up over the last decade. But certainly, Tim Ferris wrote about this 4 or 5 hour work week. I can't remember, but he was sort of the guy who sort of popularized this a few years ago, but, it was fraught with some problems, as I found myself. Can you talk a little bit about what kinds of problems initially that people were having with outsourcing and how your company addresses those?
Yeah. So as I said, first of all, a lot of people try to outsource first. And the problem with that is, take an inefficient process and give it to somebody else. It's usually going to make it less efficient, honestly. So just saying I don't want to deal with this, it's too annoying or too hard, or I don't know how to do it, give it to somebody else, it doesn't make that person's job easier. They probably won't enjoy it. And they're really not set up for success. So whenever I give a talk, I love to say, how many of you ever outsourced something? And, most people raise their hands. And then I say, keep them up and only put them down if you've never had a bad experience outsourcing something. And usually most of them keep their hands up. And a lot of times what I have to say is that 90% of the time, if you have a bad outsourcing something and you've given it to a competent outsourcer, it's usually your fault.
Right.
Because you didn't clearly explain what you wanted or convey your needs to that person. And then, of course, the competent part. Just because somebody's willing to do something cheaper somewhere else in the world doesn't mean that they're actually competent at it. There's a whole complex host of issues there. And so with our company, everybody's really, really highly trained. They're all very capable. I actually don't even like calling them virtual assistants because I think it devalues what they do. But that's that's the term that people are familiar with. They're more like on-demand genies, if you ask me. They can do anything.
Yeah. So let's talk about the process, because, of course, now you've kind of alluded to the big difference is that you're not just you're actually helping people with the process of automation and outsourcing in addition to providing the service. So when somebody goes to your site and they think this sounds like a great idea, how does the process start, and how do you onboard people and, evaluate their needs and turn that into a plan?
Yeah. So what I think is a pretty good welcoming process. And when people sign up, they book a welcome call with us. And that call, we show them how to use our system, how to place a task, what communication is going to look like. But then we spend some time trying to actually identify what their needs are and what they're going to be. And I always take it for granted how people think is a really complex thing that they can't have somebody else do is actually quite simple in many cases. And I love that when we get to show them that. A lot of times we'll look at the things that are repetitive in their lives or their businesses. The repetitive ones are easier to automate. In general, if something is repetitive in your life, there is probably some element of automation that can be infused into it. Now, if there's something that you don't like doing, you're bad at it, or you really just don't know how to do it, then that's definitely going to be an opportunity to possibly outsource some sort of an expert. But of course, we want to look at the process first. But then the other one that I like to do is something that I actually stole from Dan Sullivan at Strategic Coach, which I'm sure some of your listeners are familiar with that. And that's what they call the positive focus. So what we then do is we say, like, what's something that was really big that happened in your business in the last quarter? Some really big accomplishment. And then they tell me, and they say, why? Why was that important? And they'll tell us. And then we say, okay, well, so what's the very next thing that you need to do to move that forward? And 9 times out of 10, that is something that can be outsourced.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And the other thing that's interesting is, and again, for our audience, we're not just really talking about business processes. We're talking about basic life processes, right? So you alluded to it before. Give us some examples or an example or two of a situation where somebody thought they couldn't outsource something mundane.
Well, it's funny, what's mundane to one person is not to another. One thing that always gets me is travel. It's amazing to me how many CEOs of big companies think that they're the only one that can book their own travel. Nobody's ever going to get it right. They're never going to understand, and it just doesn't work that way. It just means that you haven't identified what your parameters are properly yet.
Right.
So travel is a big one. A good one is gift giving.
Mm-hmm.
You know how many people would like to give, and businesses, there's so much to gain giving clients and colleagues and vendors and partners gifts, but people don't do it because they don't actually put like planning into it of when they should give a gift, when, dare I say, like strategically, when is the best time to give a gift, and then also what kind of gift to give. So that's something that we do. We work with a couple different vendors and platforms where we can really look and identify very personal gifts that people will really identify with and value and show that you're checking out their business or sort of like taking them into account. So you don't have to ever think about it again because we're handling it.
Yeah. That's pretty nice. I mean, in reality, and what you're getting at too, is that one of the differences that you're talking about, that this isn't necessarily just online stuff either. I mean, there's offline things that you can automate as well, right?
Of course. I mean, everything from meal delivery to grocery shopping to maintenance in your house to office supplies. So we're not just virtual. We do everything that's in person too. I mean, our assistants won't be the ones doing it, but we'll manage that. So really that one-stop shop for everything.
Right. So if you can imagine, if you're in the case of my audience, so maybe 2 hardworking, maybe there are 2 physicians in the house and so on and so forth, there's a whole list of tasks. And you talk about things like simple things like giving gifts. You talk about groceries, any number of things that you sit there and stress out about, you can potentially outsource. And I think that's pretty exciting. You kind of alluded to some of the software or maybe there's apps and so on out there that people don't really know about that make your lives really easy or simplify things. Can you talk about some of those that, you find that most people don't seem to know about that are real simple and helpful?
In terms of software?
Yeah, or apps or whatever. I mean, for example, one is Calendly, for example, and I have not actually started using that myself.
What I was going to say.
Yeah.
I was just going to say Calendly.
Yeah. You know why I've actually strayed away from Calendly a little bit, and I think I need to get over this, is that for me, I always like to have that initial, hey, how's it going? And, try to keep it personal. And it's probably because, I'm a little old school that way still. I'll try to make it a little bit more personal. And the Calendly seems to make it a little bit less personal. Well, maybe not. Maybe you just add a layer to it, right? You just add it and, say, hey, nice talking. And here's my link. You don't have to just throw a link at them.
Yeah, but the truth is that you're personally making it more inefficient and more confusing and more frustrating for people by doing it that way.
Yeah, you're probably right. I'm sure.
The average number of emails required to schedule a meeting is 8.1.
Oh, wow.
So that's not a very good use of anybody's time, basically.
Yeah, that makes sense. What else other than Calendly?
Yeah, so that's certainly one. It depends. In your business, one good example is Slack. So people should not be using email as an internal communication tool. Now, this is probably a much larger discussion that we don't have time for on this show, but it's not a good tool for internal communication. And most people, I don't probably have to explain to them why that is.
Right.
But so you can actually completely replace email internally by using a tool like Slack to communicate with your team. So that's a good one for sure. But then even things like there's an app called Prosper Daily. And what that does is it shows you all your transactions on your credit cards and your checking accounts in a Tinder style fashion so you can swipe left and right. And unlike Mint, granular on like, this is what I spent today. And you get a sense of things. And if there's a charge that's no good, you can swipe left and they will actually follow up on it for you to find out what the problem was.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, there's like a whole host of different things that you can do, and it's just a matter of, freeing up time to do the things that you want. So what does your day look like? I mean, are you pretty much outsource everything at this point? I mean, tell me how your day starts and how it goes along and how it's different from somebody who doesn't outsource things.
Well, so it depends on the day, of course. And I have my schedule set up in a way that I really I know what I'm in for in a given day. And so on Mondays and Fridays, things are not scheduled. We block that off. Tuesdays and Thursdays are the closest thing that I could call like a buffer day, as a lot of people in Strategic Coach would call it. Although yesterday, Nick and I spent 5 hours recording 8 episodes of our podcast. And then Wednesdays today are the really busy days where I have like 12 appointments back to back. But a lot of the outsourcing that I'm doing actually is personal stuff for the most part. So I have 4 kids. Just recently, my VAs found summer camp for them. And most annoying thing for me is having to fill out the same form 3 times. And these forms for camp are now 20 pages long because you have to tell them every single possible thing about your child. So they did that, signed all that for me and took care of it. A lot of research, a lot of shopping stuff. Booking travel is a big one too. So for me, I travel a lot for work, for speaking and consulting. And they're doing all the travel booking for us and for my family. So, I mean, the biggest thing for me is just that I can have 3 kids with me and have 7 seconds to say something, and I can just shoot that off on my phone to one of our people on the team, and then it'll get done, and I just don't have to think about it again.
Yeah. And this sounds like tricky, but one of the things that I liked about your program is that you definitely have coaching. I mean, you have some of these people who can kind of help to talk to you and say, okay, well, this is how you're going to do it. Because that was certainly one of my anxieties as well. And I know there's lots of stuff going on out there, but I'm not exactly, I'm tech savvy, but I'm not, I'm Gen X tech savvy, right? So
I'm Gen X also, so don't tell your story.
Well, you look younger.
I have a phone.
That's right. Do you still have a BlackBerry? But I mean, certainly that's an element that I think that a lot of people should think about too, because I think there is something about this. It's Ari can shoot something off to somebody in 7 seconds and get it done. Well, it's because Ari does this, all the time, and eventually you can too. You just got to get into it and start trying to do it. So, I actually didn't know you had a podcast. So tell me about the podcast.
Well, I'll tell you that in 1 second. The thing I just want to, based on what you just said, to frame for people is to just think about what's on your to-do list. And also think about the situations where you want something on your to-do list to remember it later or whatever. Those are situations where you can literally just give that over to somebody else if you have the right system set up.
Right.
So that's the only thing about your to-do list done. So the podcast, we have 2 podcasts, Leverage Podcast and Optimize, Automate, Outsource Podcast. So the OAO podcast, as we call it, is just me and Nick basically riffing on all cool things that are happening in productivity that week and usually some updates on the company. The Leverage podcast is where we interview some interesting entrepreneur about how they work, basically, and what that looks like. So we had 4 interviews yesterday, which were awesome, and then we did 3 episodes, and it's a lot of fun and learn a lot from it. And the podcast is just a great source of new clients for us because they get to really understand what we can do before they actually sign up.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exciting. So in fact, I wanted to encourage people to look at this, and Ari's been kind enough to offer our listeners a $50 discount. It's actually not a very expensive service, by the way, right, Ari? It's like $129 a month, and there's an hourly fee after that. So it's fairly inexpensive, and all of these VAs, or whatever you want to call them, higher level VAs, are English speaking. It's not like you're going to have difficult communication problems and so on and so forth. So I think everyone should definitely check it out. But Ari is giving us a coupon. You can go to wealthformula.com and look for an icon there that says Leverage Outsourcing $50 off, and click on that. And if nothing else, just check it out. I mean, this is a great opportunity for those of you I know who are working your tails off out there to potentially create more time for yourself. That's not necessarily just because you've increased your cash flow. So Ari, I want to thank you very much for being on the show today. What's the actual website?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, of course. So they can head over to getleverage.com.
Getleverage.com.
Yeah, sign up with Buck's link and you'll be all set.
Awesome.
And also, so I think you said that it was $129 a month. The service is $199.
$199. Got it. Sorry about that. Anyway, thanks again, and we will be right back.
Are you having a hard time finding great investment properties? Unfortunately, the best deals are rarely found locally. Successful investing begins with the right properties in the right markets. Norada Real Estate provides everything you need to invest in the best deals across the U.S. Our simple, proven system will help you create real wealth and passive monthly cash flow. Get your free copy of the ultimate guide to passive real estate investing at noradarealestate.com/guide. That's NORADA realestate.com/guide.
Welcome back, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that show. Now, I can see some of my real estate investor friends literally, I can just visualize them thinking about the possibilities right now. Contacting sellers, brokers, building databases, etc. All these things that you didn't have time to do and you didn't, necessarily want to hire a full-time person to do it. One thing that we didn't really mention during that interview, which is really interesting, is that the way that the virtual assistants bill out, it's literally down to the second. So they don't waste any time. And you can have a very clear understanding of what, there's a lot of transparency and you can really get a sense for how much time this business or these VAs are actually spending on your tasks. So personally, I'm excited about it for all the, personal stuff. The point here again is that what we're after is time. And imagine just, cutting your email time down by 90% and never worrying about groceries or, forgetting about birthdays or finding just the right birthday present or planning vacations. Have it done all for you. How about booking restaurants or travel? Listen, the sky's the limit here, folks. So my action plan for the week for you is to go to wealthformula.com and grab that coupon that we're talking about for leverage outsourcing. It's a $50 coupon, and at least check it out. What have you got to lose other than, all those unwanted hours of tedious tasks, etc. And really, seriously, I want to know what you think about this. And so, shoot me an email if you sign up and you start using it at buck@wealthformula.com. And that's it for this episode of Wealth Formula Podcast. This is Buck Joffrey. See you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Wealth Formula Podcast. Visit us on the web at wealthformula.com. The information contained in this podcast are opinions, not fact. As always, consult your own financial team before making any investment. See you next time.